All right. So I'm Melissa Sherry. I'm from the Michigan Community Service Commission. I am the Volunteer Impact Coordinator, and I have the pleasure of organizing the National Days of Service. Here in Michigan, we have three of them. We have the MLK National Day of Service, we have Global Youth Service Day, and 9/11. And we are very lucky to have these in our state, and we're continually getting lots and lots of requests for dollars. So we thought this might help to have a session with someone who is very well experienced at organizing these. And this is Diane Woodruff from the Genesee County United Way. And she has a colleague on that I'm about to turn on the recording, and you can meet both of them. So with that, we are going to use the chat. So please do that. Everyone can go ahead and use the chat. Diane is on to help answer questions, and so am I. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and continue the recording.
Have something called the Volunteer Generation Fund. This is a special fund from AmeriCorps, and our state has one of the largest VGF funds ever awarded. And part of that is that we have some wonderful partners that work with us. We are joined today with one of my most favorite partners. This is Diane Woodruff from the United Way of Genesee County, and they serve both Genesee and Shiawassee counties, my old hometown. And Lindsay Crawford, who is the AmeriCorps Urban Safety and Health Corps leader, and she's also an AmeriCorps alum. So welcome to Diane and Lindsay. We're so glad that you're both with us today. And United Way of Genesee County is one of our lead VGF partners. This United Way does a fantastic job every year when they put together their National Days of Service. So you'll understand why we specifically asked Diane and Lindsay to join us today, because they've done some awesome things, just like what they did with the University of Michigan football team, even though I'm a Spartan.
That's okay, Lindsay is too.
I'm a Spartan too. Oh, there we go, you know.
She had to wear that there.
Yeah, no matter what, it's service, and we'll engage anybody in service, right?
That's
so yeah. So with that, I wanted to give you an opportunity to hear a little bit about the overview of how to apply for one of our national service programs, or one of our National Days of Service programs, and to help you understand again where that funding comes from. Much of it does come from the Volunteer Generation Fund, which the goal of that generation fund, the Volunteer Generation Fund, is to engage more volunteers in our state in service. So National Service Day is a wonderful way to do that. And it helps really raise the awareness of your organization, the hard work that you're doing on behalf of residents to improve the conditions in your communities. So with that, I'm going to show you our next slide. Why can't I go to the next slide? Okay, so the Michigan Community Service Commission has three primary National Days of Service. Our first one is our MLK National Days of Service, obviously in January. We are not super picky about making sure that you do it exactly on that day. We understand that every community has unique things that are happening. So we do allow that to happen on or around that day. So the next one is Global Youth Service Day. We always involve youth in our National Days of Service. We have actually funding from Youth Service America, or YSA, for youth involvement for all three of these service days. But the special one is Global Youth Service Day that focuses on youth. And last year we were really excited. We were kind of coming out of the pandemic. We were looking forward to being able to really get our numbers back up. And we had just under 4,000 youth across the state of Michigan that participated in our National Days of Service for Global Youth Service Day. In addition to that, we have, like I said, we have funding from YSA, and I am really proud to say that the commission next month is going to be honored by Youth Service America for our involvement in youth service and promoting youth service. So we're really excited about that, and we'll share some more information with you. Youth Service America hosts their day in the spring. They think that this year it's looking like it's May, but I'll send you some upcoming dates so everyone sees that as well.
Yeah, it's always in May.
Oh, it is, okay. Oh, I thought they were doing later in May though. Oh, that's okay.
The date changes a little bit in May, but it's definitely always in May. It
Oh,
has been for the last 7 years I've been working with
Oh,
them.
you're right. Yeah, so Global Youth Service Day May, and then we also have 9/11 Day of Service. We try to get that as close to 9/11 as possible, but again, we do understand that sometimes that's not possible. It's also on Sunday this year. So 9/11 Day tends to focus a lot on emergency preparedness, responding to community needs. A lot of times those community needs involve food. We've done some incredible programs that serve our veterans and our active military families. So we ask people to be as creative with all of these as possible. And then as we can, try to have some virtual opportunities as well. So with that, I want to share a little bit about the background and the funding here. The funding, again, comes from AmeriCorps, the agency, and Youth Service America. They have some extra funders with Youth Service America, including State Farm is sometimes their sponsor, and the Mott Foundation. They have a real vested interest in youth service. So then the MCSC, or the Michigan Community Service Commission, provides mini grants, usually in the amounts of $100 to $1,000 based on the number of volunteers engaged in service and also the type of service that is being provided. We will work with you on your grant though. Almost every time we're working with applicants to just kind of make the service day a little more impactful. The grants for the National Service Days are typically available about 2 months prior to the service day. There's a link here that I'll send out to you later. You don't have to write that down, but we have some descriptions of each service day, some links, and some resources that are available. We also offer a toolkit that has project ideas for every service day, and they differ based on really kind of what the angle is. We don't usually get a lot of emergency preparedness for Martin Luther King Day, for example. It's not to say that we wouldn't fund that, but many of those tend to be centered around like equity and inclusion, things like that. But we are really most interested in finding out what your community needs are and being able to support those. So again, our next service day is 9/11. I sent this out in the reminder, but this is the link to the application. And just as a reminder, the application deadline is August 10th. We do our best to get notices out to people ahead of time, and we have actually already started to review those grants. And fortunately, we have already 30, so we're really happy about that. Yeah. So for the National Days of Service, these are our focus areas. These are our focus areas actually for most, but as you can probably imagine, disaster services and veterans and families tend to be a little more of a focus here for 9/11 Day. There is also a really big push for working on food security for communities as well. And these are some of our other areas, our economic opportunity. We've talked about ideas with economic opportunity, including holding a job fair, or even, a resume review, providing some mentoring to individuals who are seeking employment. And a lot of those can actually be new vets. So we would ask you to kind of be creative in that. Environmental stewardship, this is a big piece of what the commission is working on with climate change. Many of our disasters that we have suffered in our state are related directly to climate change. And so we ask people to be conscientious of that. And fortunately, we've had many different projects that we've sponsored in the past that were centered around environmental stewardship. These include community gardens. It includes, land preservation. It also includes like Arbor Day, things like that. And then education. A big piece of 9/11 is actually education. And there are a ton of resources, fortunately, that are available that are age appropriate lessons for schools to be able to teach more about 9/11 Day and the impact and the importance of that at an appropriate level. So we have some links for that I'll share with you too. Healthy futures, that is another area of focus for us. Veterans and military families, obviously, we've done things such as Habitat for Humanity builds. We've done porches, small repairs, large repairs. We also have several areas in the state that are still suffering from disasters, and to be able to connect with those military families, if that's a good idea. Racial equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion opportunities. And again, those other projects that are based on community need. So our communities tend to be very creative about this. So we ask you to think about how you would honor 9/11 Day, how you bring that about, but also really connect that with your mission, and also make a real effort to get media exposure for it. That's always very important. And then don't look at the volunteers that participate as episodic. Look at them as being able to start a relationship with them, a long-term relationship that would bring more volunteers and more talent into your organization. So here are those resources. We, as I said before, always have a toolkit available for every single service day. There's the toolkit right here. This is the site for the grade appropriate lesson plans about the impact of 9/11. And then we also have our day of MLK resources from AmeriCorps. We can also send out our toolkit, and we make that available when we issue the announcement for the grant. And then we have the same here from Youth Service America. Youth Service America has a tremendous amount of ideas about service that's centered around the UN UN sustainability goals. They also have goals for including a huge percentage of youth in service on an annual basis, and they'll give you ideas and support to be able to do that. So it's really worth it. If you want to involve youth in service, just take a look at their site. But also, if you want to plan a youth service day, they're always more impactful if you can take a page from one of them and use that to help formulate the idea of your project. And then we're always here too. That's another thing. Never feel like you can't call us. I usually leave my phone number on there to call, email, reach out to ask, would this be something that you would fund? And I really would appreciate that, because if you had an idea, it would be a good idea to be able to say, hey, is this a possibility? And I'll help you with that. So with that, here's a little bit about the funding breakdown. So the funding amounts are available based on the scale of volunteer involvement. We have goals every year about how many individuals, how many youth will participate in these National Days of Service. So naturally, those that have a higher level of engagement will have, they tend to warrant more resources. So engaging 200 volunteers or more are eligible to compete for the $1,000 level. We do not hand out a lot of $1,000 level projects, just so you're aware. And we're really looking for the value of the impact. we're looking for an impact that really does respond to a community need, that's having a lasting impact on the organization, on the recipients of service, and also on the volunteers. Is there a way to keep the volunteers coming back, and how are you doing that? What kind of creative ideas do you have for that? We also have reduced the number of volunteers engaged. So if you think about it and you think to yourself, engaging 200 volunteers or more may or may not be a big a leap. However, when we were organizing and just about to award our MLK Day funds, we had almost 80 projects, and many of them had indoor activities because it's Michigan and it's January. And some of those we just weren't able to do because of the in response to the variants that were coming around that were the COVID variants that were very contagious at the time. So we would ask you to take a look at that. You don't have to get $1,000 grant just to get $1,000 grant. But if you could do the same kind of work and have the same impact for $250, then do it. We've had some really wonderful projects that didn't ask for any money. They just wanted us to be able to promote their project, help volunteers, more volunteers come to their project, and things like that they didn't need that funding. So even if you have funding elsewhere, let us help you promote your days of service. We promote it on a national level. We promote it amongst our governor, our lieutenant governor, and many of our elected officials. We also promote it through our Get Connected site, which is statewide. And then many of our partners, such as Diane and Lindsay and Flint, they will also share that on their Get Connected sites as well. And it also feeds up to national sites like Volunteer Match, and then AmeriCorps will promote those, as will Youth Service America. So take a look at these. It kind of gives you an idea. As we come out of the pandemic, fingers crossed, these numbers will change, but for now, it will be on the grant every single time to help you understand what does it take. But we wanted to share this and have a meaningful conversation with people about the level of engagement and how much service people are doing. As we come out of the pandemic, and it seems that we can get into more, people-to-people service, we'll be looking for service that lasts several hours, and so that it is meaningful. We've had some that have lasted half an hour, and we have to really look at that because of the opportunity to be able to have these funds go as far as possible. The other thing too is that we do want to make sure we have an equitable distribution of funds, and so we're always looking for rural communities to host National Service Day projects, as well as more urban settings, city settings, things like that. So think about that too. And if there's a way that you can promote in your service area involving children from rural areas, volunteers from rural areas, that would be great. So this is really kind of a rundown of the requirements for national service funding. We always have an online application. It is not difficult to write. We're never looking for a book. Giving us a book does not necessarily translate to having a clear, concise idea about service, but we are definitely always looking for that element of service. An example would be service to me service in this situation would be things like something that Flint did more recently for 9/11 Day. They went out to fire departments and they painted a mural. They had volunteers involved in painting this mural and doing a big cleanup. They tend to layer things, other opportunities in with it, but we've had other ones, and Diane will talk more about how they've made these experiences so rich. But we've had other ones that wanted to do, for example, a fundraiser. And the fundraiser in itself is not exactly what we would consider a service. Fundraising can be a part of a service, but it can't be the whole service. So for example, if you were going to raise funds for a homeless shelter, we would want you in your group to do a service project at the homeless shelter. And then if there was an auxiliary activity that was supported without federal dollars, that would be great. The other thing too that is a little tricky is transportation. It is okay to use these funds for transportation, but what we can't do is we can't approve funds for like a gift card for gas. But if you did hire a service, whether you partnered with the local public transportation and you owed them several $100s for this, and that was a part of it to provide transportation, that would be fine. Just we have to be able to have a trackable expense. So just those things to keep in mind when planning, and we can also assist with that. Once the grant is approved, and you'll get an award letter from the Michigan Community Service Commission, and you'll also get a grant agreement. That grant agreement spells out your responsibilities for things like our final report that we need, things like that. And that we need that signed and returned to us by the deadline. And then we always ask people to start on this. If you are not a vendor, if your organization is not a vendor in the state of Michigan SGMA system, make sure you start that process early. You will need what's called a vendor number. And lots of times it starts with the letter CV or VS followed by some numbers. We need that to be able to ensure that you're going to get funding. What that does is that it puts it in through the state of Michigan, and you will get an electronic payment. You will not receive a check. You will get an electronic payment from the state of Michigan. They do have up to 45 days after we've submitted the paperwork to be able to pay that. But typically, unless there is an issue, and those issues tend to be on the grantee side, what that means, if you give us a wrong address, even the suite number, if it's off, that will delay the whole process and it'll be rejected. So they make sure that everything is exact. So make sure on the final report that you are prepared to give us exactly the correct information, not the program name, but the legal organization name, and then things will go smoothly, and the appropriate address. During the event, we do ask you to take pictures and also acknowledge our funders and acknowledge the Michigan Community Service Commission in social media, and we will provide you in the toolkit the appropriate social media tags. Then the final thing is complete the report at the end, and we always give you the link for that, and I always do some reminders. That final report includes, that final report includes a place to write your stories up about the impact of your service. We want photos included, and we also ask for the number of volunteers, the number of recipients that were served, the volunteer hours that were donated for the project, and tell us about the outcome. In addition to that, there's usually from Youth Service America, they want to know if certain populations of youth are being involved. Are they being asked to be involved? So things like students from rural areas, sometimes they do have some unique challenges that prevent them from volunteering. So how did you engage them? If there are youth that are from that are experiencing homelessness, that would be a special population to let us know that you've engaged them. And what were your ideas for that? Then the other thing is submitting your receipts. I don't want original receipts, but we ask for a PDF copy of those receipts. And then what we do is I will add those up, and you will be reimbursed on the amount that was spent. All of our National Service Day grants are reimbursed grants. So you will put the money out to do this, and then we will in a very timely way, we will reimburse you based on the amount of receipts that you have. They do need to be actual receipts, and it does not exceed the amount of the funds that you have requested. But in order to make sure that we do get a timely reimbursement, you have to get it in by the deadline. You also must make sure that you get us that information on the Sigma system, including the legal name of the organization. And we do recognize that not every organization that applies for a grant is a 501c3. That is okay. You just need to have a fiduciary, and that could be another nonprofit organization. It could be a community of faith. It could be a municipality. It could be a school. Any of those are perfectly okay. They just must serve as the fiduciary. So they will get the payment, and they will be the ones to reimburse a organization that is not yet a 501c3. Are there any?
Definitely check your local United Way or the nearest United Way. They're very good at, we're very good, I know, in our area about being a fiduciary if we need to.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was thinking the same thing, but I didn't want to promise that. United Ways are usually wonderful partners in service. That is a main tenet of their service, is getting people involved. So if you have a great idea, don't let that be a deterrent, and we may be able to help you as well with some ideas. Are there any questions about this process or something that comes up so far, just on the MCSC side of things? Let me bring my chat up here. Feel free to join us in the chat. Oh, yes,
I've been keeping track of that.
Point. Yeah, thank you. Diane put a great point in there. Once you have it, you don't need to reapply. You only apply once. If you're a school, you have it because the state makes you payments. Many nonprofits have had agreements with the state, and you get payments from the state, and that's what it is. But just making sure that you do try to have this in in advance, so it's not a problem. Unmute if you do have questions. I mean, I'm willing to answer any of them. And then as you're thinking about questions too, just know that on Thursday, July 28th at 1 o'clock, we have our networking session. It is open to everyone, and come and talk to us about your ideas for service. We can help you work on those. Diane will be there, maybe Lindsay will be there too, but it's just really kind of an informal idea session, and you can chat with other folks about National Days of Service, share what you've done in the past, share some successes or some challenges that you've had. Well, with that, if there aren't any questions, I'm going to turn it over to our lovely presenters today. Yay! So I'll turn it over to Diane. She has control of the screen, but if either you or Lindsay need my help, let me know. But with that, I'm going to just turn it over to you. And I'll monitor the chat from here on out.
Okay. Oh. I don't know so I have control of the screen.
Yep.
I think it's just delayed, maybe.
Okay, I was going to mute myself, so I'm going to come up here. It is kind of weird here.
Yeah, because I'm not clicking, and it's just going through.
Okay, go ahead. I'm not touching it now either.
Sorry, technical difficulties. You'd think after all this COVID business, we'd be experts at all. See, I'm not. Let's see if I can get us back to the right. There we go. Now I have control. Okay. All right.
I'm not touching it.
I got it, Lindsay. All right. So again, my name is Diane Woodruff. I'm the volunteer coordinator at United Way of Genesee County. We are located in Flint, Michigan. And Lindsay Crawford is with me, my co-partner in crime for most things when it comes to service in our community. She is an AmeriCorps alum, as Melissa said, and She currently runs one of our AmeriCorps programs. We are both on our community impact team. So if it involves service, the two of us are there and helping run it and hopefully making things go smooth. So we have a presentation that we just want to, most of this, you know, and if you have thoughts or ideas that you want to share that's different in here, please just feel free. We want this to be as interactive as possible. We don't like to reinvent the wheel. So, you know, we are all about sharing ideas. We are all about sharing anything that we've already made. If it looks useful to you, just don't hesitate to reach out. We will gladly send planning documents and different things that we've used in the past. Because we all know that as we're working in this field, that we wear 5, 6, 7 hats a week. And so we definitely need all the help we can get. I'm not touching the
I
screen.
know, I did that. I was trying to answer Sheila. She says, hey, how can I sign up for that network session on Thursday? I'll send that link out, okay? Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm not gonna touch it anymore, though, I promise.
No problem. Actually, the picture on this page is from our last year's 9/11 Day of Service. Wait, was it last year's, Lindsay?
Yeah.
Yes. You know, COVID time makes everybody's time just, you have no idea what year it was. 1 year ago, 7 years ago, I don't know. So this was last year's 9/11 Day of Service. So we'll be talking quite a bit about that. As you can see, we get a pretty good turnout. We have a pretty large number of AmeriCorps members serving in our community at any given time. We actually have what we call the Flint National Service Accelerator, which is where all AmeriCorps members serving in our city meet monthly for professional development and networking and making sure that they're all working together within their placement sites, so their host sites. And so this is actually, when you're looking at this picture, is a low number for us because this was our first one after, you know, when we were allowed after COVID.
I was just gonna kind of add on to that a little bit. One of the unique things about our days of service is that it's not just the AmeriCorps programs that are, you know, managed out of the United Way, but it's every AmeriCorps member, you know, in Genesee County and surrounding areas sometimes. So we're fortunate to have that network where we can engage a large number of volunteers. And in fact, you know, our community tends to look forward to these days of service, especially MLK Day and 9/11, you know, Day of Service. Those are both, you know, have over the years become, you know, community events where people will bring their families, and it's something that, you know, Diane has over the last, I don't know how many years, Diane, you've been doing MLK Day, but you know, it grew to about 800 volunteers, and, you know, it's something that the entire community actually looks forward to. And when I was a member, it was my favorite day of service.
Yay. And ultimately, that's what we want to help you have. That day that it becomes a staple in your community, right? The idea that you have that you create that is just keeps going and can be a legacy, right? For your community. And that's what our MLK Day has become. So our 9/11 Day of Service is big, but not as memorable because we change it every year. And I think that's why the MLK just kind of sticks out a little bit more for our community because they know what it's going to be, where it's going to be, when it's going to be. And 9/11, of course, even though it's always on 9/11, we do different projects all over the city, and we try to incorporate whatever the theme is for that year. We look at what the commission sends down for that. We look at what the AmeriCorps universe sends down for that, and that's why it changes up. I'm trying to advance slides and can again. So Melissa, can you advance the slide? She left me. Okay, so I'm not gonna even try to go back to the about us. But see, now it's going like crazy. So I don't know who's
Sorry.
moving me. That's all right.
That's me again. I was admitting someone in. I'm sorry, here.
That's okay.
Are you okay there?
Yeah, I need to go back to stages of planning. That's where we can start. Well, you can stay here. You can stay here. So the only thing that we missed, and we can gladly share this presentation so that you have it. On the first one, you might have seen it come up a couple times. The stages of planning a volunteer event, of course, initiation is the first stage. So we'll talk about that. And then there's planning and execution. So we'll just go from here and go ahead and continue on. And hopefully we can get this down with the turning of the pages here.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the initiation stage of planning a volunteer project, and that would include, your goals and objectives for that project. So surrounding your event, which is the central focus of what you're doing, you're going to have the what and the why. So the what is, kind of what is that service project? So is it cleaning up park? Is it boarding up vacant properties? Is it packing, meals? And then the why would be, what is the impact that you want that project to have? So that could be for, removing blighted or boarding up blighted properties. That could be community safety. If it's, packing meals, it could be addressing, food access. And a goal could also be something like bringing disparate organizations in your community together. And the goals and objectives of a project this is what you always want to start with, and it's something you always want to keep in mind the entire time, so that your project remains focused and doesn't get too diffused over, adding too many objectives in, or, you want the focus to remain the same through the entire course of the project.
Okay, thank you. Oh, okay, I think I got it down and it's letting me advance them now. Yeah, so format development. So just looking at your event details, right? Trying to figure out, of course, planning how many you think you might have. So will you have enough space, right? And then one thing for our community that we always try to look at is how accessible will it be? Here in our Flint community, we have to look at how many, even with just our AmeriCorps members, don't have transportation. So are we near a busing line? What does that look like as far as, is there a space that we can change to that is near a bus line, right? Are people familiar with where it is? Does it have wheelchair accessibility? I'm not touching anything.
No.
Those kind of things, right? And then date and time is something, it seems so like relevant, like, oh yeah, we're just, this is what works for us. I don't know how many times we have had to go back and look at changing things because it falls on something major happening in the community. So hopefully you have those networks in place a little bit already with your other community partners and organizations, so that you can talk about that. Like if it's the annual food hungers, celebration, right? We're not planning it on that day. Those kind of things. Now 9/11, of course, is totally different, right? Hopefully what I would say there is when you're looking at date and time, and if you know it's going to be then you're also going to look at how many other people in the community probably want to also plan that event, because it is a day of service. A lot of people are planning around MLK, Global Youth Service Day, 9/11. So start early in your event details and say, who else would be doing something that we could partner together to make it better and bigger, right? So instead of trying to have 9, 10, 9/11 day of projects going on, is there something that needs to be done in your community that could benefit from all of you doing it together, or planning it all together and having breakouts, right? So I think we tend to just look at our own little window and we plan it and we do that, and then we hear about something later. So if we can start early and reach out to, hey, are you doing an event? What does it entail? So maybe you can make it different, right? So if we're doing something with, so say for 9/11, we're doing something with the fire stations, and we reach out to someone and say, oh, we're doing something with fire stations. Well, then how about if we do something with, EMTs, right? Let's think about other first responders, so that there's just a unique set of different projects going on in your community that same day, so that you can get the best participation. Because I always have to go over this when I'm going through volunteer management with our nonprofits that we help with that here. And just because someone wants to volunteer, you don't just say, oh, you want to volunteer and you hate dogs, but the Humane Society needs you, so I'm going to place you over here. That volunteer is never going to, they might go volunteer that day, they're never going to come back. And our ultimate goal is to create a lifelong volunteer, right? I don't care if it's with me or not. I want a lifelong volunteer in my community. So if it's not with me, hey, that's fine, but let's create it for somebody, because ultimately it's coming back from my community. So those are things you want to think about in those event details when you're formatting the development very early on. And then of course it can be a different, volunteer pool, right? So, it could be skilled volunteers that you need, right? Or it could be anybody that can do it. Are you focusing on kids? So you need to think about who you're engaging with when you're planning that event, right? So our MLK Day of Service, we knew our goal was to make it a family day of service. So we had to look at what that meant. So my pool was kids, everybody, elderly. I had to look at the whole thing. So how do we do that? So how do we create and find an event that a 5-year-old can do, but also a 92-year-old can do? Because that's been our range at that event. I've had 5-year-olds and I've had 92-year-olds. And so you really want to consider that. And then of course, setting that realistic goal, right? So how many people do you need to complete that project? So we talk about that later, and we've all been there, right? We've been on both sides of it. We've got all this work set that needs to be done. And then I have 5 volunteers. So there's no way I'm going to touch hardly any of it. And you're not going to be able to tell what I did. Or we've all been there and we're like, we even had a little bit of it, at one of our sites with the U of M football team. That we worked with one group and they planned this and they were done in 10 minutes, right? So really planning realistically, how many volunteers do you need to get done what your purpose is, but also having that backup. And I pushed
So Diane, there was a message in the chat, says, out of curiosity, what job did y'all come up with that a 5-year-old and a 92-year-old can do?
So our MLK Day of Service is always a food packing event. So they're the ready meals. We do it with the outreach program out of Iowa. So everything's shipped in. We've done rice and beans. We've done oatmeal. So you have a station of like 10 to 12 people at each station. And we've had up to 80 stations because like we said, we had 800 people at the year before COVID broke out, and we made the world news. But they love it. They can do the stickers. There's a sealing machine once it's done, and the kids would work on that. And then we really used our AmeriCorps members. So you might have a skill set in your area, a group. And if you don't have AmeriCorps, maybe it's, some other well-known service group that we have lead each table. And then we have them really be the connectors, that this day is about getting to know your community and working alongside them. So we give them all, this is all part of our prep design on that day, is we give them all talking points of how they can engage the different generations. So we love it. We have, usually it's teams that come out to that now. I'll get like Girl Scout groups. I'll get multiple corporations that'll bring 50 plus people. And so we just make sure that we have that also in place when you have such a wide range of volunteers, that you are thinking about how will you engage them together. I'm usually on a microphone and playing music and going around and talking to the kids and talking to the elderly and just asking what it was like back in their day when they were a Girl Scout, if there's working next to a Girl Scout. So that's all part you'll see in the planning of a volunteer event to make it so successful. Isn't always just about what the outcome is, as far as we packed, 20,000 meals. It's about, did we engage the community? did we encourage someone to want to volunteer again, right? Like those are ultimate goals. And so if people are not enjoying themselves also, even though it is work, they're not going to be as likely to come back to one of your events, or they're not likely to volunteer again, which bottom line, everyone's full, lifelong volunteer.
One of the things that for me makes that event so much fun is that it is such a huge, community event. And then also you can see the real numbers of what you're doing as well, and being able to engage with, just as an AmeriCorps member, sometimes you end up working or, doing a lot of service projects with other AmeriCorps members. So to have that wider view is really helpful to see kind of a broader impact. And then also working with the organization that sends the meals or the items to be packed into meals is another great opportunity to connect with, other service organizations in the country. So it's a lot of fun.
And can someone advance? It's not advancing.
No, I will.
Thank you. I don't know why we're having technical difficulties.
Sorry, guys.
There we go.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just don't want to hit it hard enough. Maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure.
So we can pass this, but you can answer it if you want. We'll kind of, because we're talking more. So this was stuff so we could make it a little more interactive, but just keep putting your questions in the chat and we can make it that way. Raise your hand if you want to be on speaker. We're happy with that. So we want to talk about what resources you would need to make your volunteer event a success.
So the next slide is, included in that resource planning is going to be building a budget, and that inquiring in-kind and financial donations, and then tracking that spending. So when you're creating a budget, you need to include as much as you can think of. So that would be transportation, what kind of supplies are you going to need for the project? Thinking through, what time of year is that project happening so that you can have extra water for your volunteers that come out if it's, in the summertime. Do you need, a shade structure present on the site? Is that something you have to rent? And then also researching, where you can acquire those items. So oftentimes we'll partner with, a company like Home Depot to provide, some tools. And many corporate organizations have, service, in-kind donations available for service projects that are happening in their area. So often you can get a lot of the things just donated rather than purchasing them. And another benefit of that is that you're also strengthening that collaboration within your community between, your organization and some organization that may be donating. Maybe in the future, they'll want to bring volunteers out, or this time they'll want to have volunteers present at your event. So it's just another way to not only save money, because we're all, most of us don't have unlimited resources, but also to build those bonds within your community between yourself and corporations or other organizations.
I want to add too right here, Lindsay, too, for the inquiring in kind. If you haven't been on both sides of the fence in your organization, and not all of us have, you don't realize how important those in-kind donations tracking can be for your finance department, for those grants that you're applying for. So if our local Keep Genesee County Beautiful, we can go to them for gloves at any given time, and lawn bags, those kind of things. And so we just constantly are getting them from them when we have a cleanup. But if we don't think to track that as an in-kind, it can make, by tracking it can make it a lot better for your organization in the long run. So like I said, if you're not on that side of the fence, for your finance team to know how much in-kind came in, to be able to add that to their processing, and then also even just applying with the commission or any other grant, right? To be able to say, hey, this event is gonna cost us $3 grand. We've got 2,500 in-kind donations, so I know I've been on the fence side of having to review these kind of grants, and I'm like, all right, I'm totally impressed with that. We need to, look at this grant and give it a yes, right? So I just want to add that a lot of times when we're only doing the volunteer side all the time and planning, we never think to consider that. We only consider the budget as this is how much money I need because I have to physically buy these things. But please also remember to put that in there so you have an accurate description somewhere of what this is costing you to have and how much resources are used, whether it's out of your own pocket or out of in-kind donations. Sorry, Lindsay.
That kind of what Diane was saying, in addition to it benefiting you and your organization, those in-kind donations when you're applying for grants, sometimes the organizations that you're getting those items from also need those numbers tracked. So with the example that Diane just gave about Genesee County Beautiful and the gloves, after we have an event, they'll come back to us and say, okay, how many pairs of gloves did you use? Because they have to turn in those numbers for their grants, whatever they may be. Similar to that, like AmeriCorps programs in general, a lot of times, we will let the MCSC know about how many in-kind donations our members received. So those numbers can be important, not just for you as the organization who's planning the event, but those other participants as well. Because I know that Keep Genesee County Beautiful, for example, they love it when they can say, hey, we gave out all these pairs of gloves to all these different events. So for them, it's a benefit as well. So those partnerships, again, this is a way to strengthen those partnerships to make sure the organizations in your community are all, thriving. And then Melissa also mentioned tracking that spending, keeping track of those receipts. We scan everything in. You probably want to have a spreadsheet created ahead of time. I'm not the best with that, but over time I've come to know, those forms are super important. You will thank yourself afterwards.
And anybody who has done a service project behind someone else in their organization, we all know how much we appreciate having one. And when I go to repeat an event that has already been done, when I start at a new organization, say, having that and being able to look and go, oh, okay, oh, wow, I need to get this and this and this. So that legacy is always great. Okay. Next screen. So building a team and engaging partners. So it's very important. We've learned, we all talk about, we always make sure we get partners to the table and who else can be involved in that. But remember when Lindsay first started, we talked about why, what's the why of the project? You want to make sure that you are inviting partners that share that why, or that you're at least discussing that so that everybody is on the same page. And what we tend to do when we're planning things is plan it all, and then we ask a partner later on, we're like, yeah, we can bring them in. But you can really foster that relationship a lot better if you bring them in early. Bring them in the planning process, and you'd be amazed also at how many more resources that brings you to, because they might have a connection that you don't have. They might engage in another corporate partner that would love to be the ones that paid for the food or whatever, whether it's lunch for the volunteers or those kind of things. So you're really missing out by waiting and just adding partners at the end because they're bringing, say, one aspect to it. So you figure they don't need to be in on the planning process. They're just coming to the event and they know their job that day. But when you really make it a full-on partnership and bring them on in the early planning process, we found our events got a lot better, a lot more personal when we did that. And then, of course, then you can have that discussion on how will they be engaged at the event. And it might just be that they're just a funder. I just want to give money, that's it. They might be great organizers and want to be part of that, right? Or they just want to be supportive. So you can find all that out early in that, engaging them early enough in the process. Next slide, Melissa. So the planning stage.
You can go ahead, next slide.
Next slide. this is just more of our AmeriCorps members at a levy cleanup. We have a lot of cleanups. I think sometimes our members are like, what?
Yeah.
But that's why we have to find fun ways at every single one of them.
So run of shows. So that's basically, an agenda of how you want your event to go. And it should be as detailed as possible with times, rules, from start to finish. And there's a couple of reasons for doing this. Obviously you are thinking through how the day is going to go. Everybody will know where they're supposed to be at what time, which certainly helps make things run more smoothly, but also you just don't know what's going to happen on that day. And somebody could have an accident on the way to the event. And if they're the only one who knows where everyone's supposed to be, that's going to be a major problem. So this, allows you to, if emergencies come up or things happen day of, everybody's still on the same page, and you're not going to have a whole event fall apart just because one person isn't there. But it also, especially when we're dealing with multiple organizations, large groups of people, things get chaotic, and to have something to refer to for everyone to be on the same page from start to finish is just incredibly helpful. So, with the event that we just had last week, one of our sites had a very detailed event agenda. They sent it out to all of their staff. Literally everybody involved knew where they were supposed to be at what time. And so it also saved the organizer from having to answer questions all day long. There's going to be enough going on. This, saves you time and also stress. So that's, the point of that. And it is something that I think is like overlooked a lot of times. People will be pretty general with a runner show, but as detailed as possible just makes your life a whole lot easier.
Yeah, and it's definitely, I think what's happened a lot and how we used to, if you have like a event schedule that you give out to everybody that comes to the event, right? Even volunteers, like this is what's happening from 8 to 12, and this, like that schedule, a lot of people will be like, oh, we have a schedule, we have a run of show. That is not your run of show. That is your timetable for everybody that's at the event, as far as knowing kind of lunches at this time and services from this time to this time. This run of show really gives those details. And so, how many of us have CEOs that are all over the place, right? They've got a ton of things always going on. They're not at this stuff all day long. And so I can tell you our CEO loves a run of show, because then he knows exactly what time he can come and be the most beneficial, and when we require him to be there at a certain time if he's speaking or those kind of things. So we have, we just got back from the Points of Light conference. Lindsay and I did was last week, well, the week before, I guess. They have every year now, they do something they learned out of Atlanta. They do what they call failure night. And then we have about 4 or 5 people that'll come up on a stage. It's all informal. We usually have it at a bar with like food and drinks. And they talk about something that they did that went horribly wrong and how you learn from it. And so we did a service project, and we had a new person on our staff that we thought just would know to create one of these. We didn't go over that, and we'd seen her do enough events in community. We thought this would be great, and we got there and there was no runner show. So like Lindsay and I and another were like, we had no idea what she expected us to do, because we just expected to see the run of show. So it was not kind of on all of us. We hadn't really looked at that, right? So a lot of times the failure you learn a lot more from than you do the great event, right? And so then we learned at that point, okay, this is something that we include now in how you plan an event, that there should be a run of show, at least for staff back end, to know exactly what's going on. Melissa, can you move to the next slide?
Absolutely.
Data collection. So of course, you need to make sure you know how you need to track your project's impact. There's always, the service impact, there's the volunteers engaged. Strongly encourage, if you can, if you're getting funding from someone, we tend to fill out that, that grant request, right? And we just fill in all the stuff we need to fill in and we send it off, then we get happy we have the money. We don't always look at those pages that are like pages of stuff beforehand that kind of tell us a lot of stuff, like Melissa was telling us earlier, what data we need to have for her afterwards, right? So if first, always check that grant request that you had to fill out, the info might be there. If not, don't hesitate to reach out to a funder and ask what information it might need before the event, because we've all been there. I went to fill in after the fact and went, oh, I didn't track that, and then I'm in my head going, how many bags of garbage did we fill, or how many like dumpsters did we fill? How big was the dumpster? So really thinking about data collection before the event even happens will make your life 10 times easier after the event, especially for all that tracking. And hopefully you have something in place at your organization of stuff that you're already tracking. But that's what we all should have. But I know, in all honesty, we don't always have the best either, right? I'm always looking at ways of how should we be tracking this and how are we keeping that data? And maybe we don't have the best software, and maybe we're doing it all, Excel. So are we making sure that everybody at the table is reporting that data the same way? So we learned the hard way that we really needed to know beforehand what data collection looked like. And then of course the volunteers engaged. With those Youth Service America grants, YSA grants, we have those also. I oversee we have them that we give out to our community. And so I try to make sure that they know and understand that they're going to be asked, because they usually don't look at it, because I know I've been there too. They're going to be asked how many of those volunteers were between the ages of 5 and 12, how many were between the ages of 13 and 18, how many were 18 to 23, and then how many were adults, right? How many were male, how many were female? So those are the kind of things that you don't always actually, they're not on your check-in list, right? It doesn't tell me if it's, I might be able to guess if it's a boy or a girl, that's fine. But I mean, I don't know ages. We're not asking that at check-in always. So knowing that, I know like with YSA, and I tell all my grantees on that, just know you need it, and you can kind of guesstimate that, right? We're not going to offend anybody by asking them what nationality they are, how they identify themselves. But we definitely can give them somewhat of a number, because ultimately that's also why data is so important. Like Lindsay was talking about, Keep Genesee County Beautiful. By us giving that data of how many gloves we used, they report that back to their funders and they get funded again. They say, oh, look, the numbers matter. They're making a difference. It's being used. So let's give them money to have more of that to give back out. It's the same thing with Youth Service America and with the commission, right? They're proving that we're getting stuff done, right? And so they need those numbers to know, and YSA especially is like known for the data collection when it comes to youth service, right? Nation or worldwide. And so that's what those numbers are used for. So I always tell everybody, don't freak out when you start going, I don't have those numbers, I don't know. It's okay to guess a little bit. It's okay to say there were 10 there, and I'm pretty sure 2 of them were Asian American. It's okay to guess those kind of information, but know that you're going to need it. So get that up front for sure. And does anybody have any questions right now, or anything you want to ask or add to? Move to the next slide too, Melissa, please. Sometimes data collection, I know, is very hard. When we think about cleanups, it's always like, did anybody count how many leaf bags we filled? And then if we're doing leaf bags, but are we also doing dumpsters? How do we use that? How do we get that data, right? What are we going to count? So knowing ahead of time how you're going to count your impact is very important.
You know, the other thing is sometimes it's just a photo of the impact, like the before and the after. I think that's wonderful too. So think about that as well. That is an easy way to think through to the
And
impact.
another one I think about too, Melissa, is sometimes there's what did the service, how did it impact, or how many did it impact in community, right? So if we've done a cleanup at the school, say we put in flowers, you know, how many people are we impacting? Well, we're impacting every single person at the school. So every child at the school, and then you've got teachers and admin at the school. But then how many parents are dropping kids off at the school that are now seeing that, right? So there's those kind of questions that'll come up too. So just knowing in your head how you're going to think about that and where you could get that data to know, like how many people, if we cleaned up a certain park in the area, where can we get data that shows about how many people visit that park each year? Because then that's data you can use for your project and say, we did a cleanup at this park and that impacts 2,000 individuals in our community each year, because that's how many people visit that park, right? So that's data that we don't tend to reach forward far enough in our head thinking, oh, that's another way we could look at it. And sometimes it's just a matter of looking up some data about where you did the cleanup.
And then also, you know, for our Russ Mobby day of service, it was a park, but there was also it's within a neighborhood. So, you know, the neighbors right across the street from the park, you know, they also benefited from that and, you know, came out actually and thanked us for being there. So, you know, think creatively about how you're tracking that impact. And it's always good. Personally, I love to see stories and photos, you know, that are personal, not just the numbers. You know, the numbers are important, obviously, but having those stories and those photos really, you know, make it come alive, I think.
And then keeping those stories, like Lindsay said, when you have people that are driving by, seeing you doing a project and are honking or stopping to thank you, that little tidbit of the story in your after write-up really makes an impact.
Yeah.
So don't forget those stories. Make sure you include them.
Yeah, because we all love that.
Yeah.
I think everybody, even if, you know, volunteers, I love hearing that, you know, an event that I volunteered at got that kind of attention, because it just is why, you know, it's great. Who doesn't love that? So now we're going to move on a little bit to project safety. So do you mind advancing that slide, please? Sure. Thank you. Okay, so when we talk about project safety, that is a variety of things. These are all things that you really have to think about before your event. Do you need waivers? Do you need media release forms? So if you don't have a waiver form on file, I suggest creating one, because you'll probably need it. And then also making sure that people are aware that their image can be used for media for you and others, particularly you have to think about your population. Are you working with kids? You know, these things are really important. You want to make sure that everybody is, if something happens, that you're protected, but then that also people are kind of aware, hey, my picture might be taken and it might show up on social media. I personally like to know ahead of time, just like, you know, this is being recorded. If you sign that release form, you know that it's a possibility that your image could be used, and it just kind of gives people a heads up a little bit too. Another aspect of project safety is, you know, it's like the site safety requirements. If you're doing a project in a school or a jail, do people need to have a background check before they enter the premises? And that varies, you know, quite a bit, but you know, some sites you might need to have a background check to be cleared in order to enter that space. Authorizations that could include permission to be on the property. So let's say it's a public property like a park, and the county maintains that park. If you're going to be having an event there, you may need to get their permission to be on that property. Or if you're doing a neighborhood cleanup, who owns the property that you're doing the cleanup on? So if it's a bunch of vacant houses that are privately owned, you may not want to do a cleanup there because you may not be able to get permission to be on that property, and there could be some liability issues there. So it's important to think about the space that you're going to be holding your event in, and what kind of permission you're going to need to be there. And then obviously I think safety, the first thing that comes to mind is just volunteer safety. Do you need high visibility vests? Are people going to be working along a roadside? What kind of PPE do people need? Do you need masks? Are you going to be in a dusty environment or working in a building that has potentially, old mold or things of that nature? Are people going to be wearing masks? What kind of gloves do people need? So are they going to be handling potentially, if you're picking up trash, are they going to be grabbing something that might be toxic? Do they need thicker gloves? Are you going to be working with tools where people should have like really heavy duty gloves on or need special training? Those things are really important to think about. And if you're considering doing a project that requires really high hazardous tools like a chainsaw or something, you may want to rethink that, or make sure that anybody who would be close to that has specialized training, and those are the only people that are going to be touching those items, things like that. And then you also want to have an emergency plan in place for inclement weather, whether that's snow, rain, heat, lightning, and then an emergency plan. You never know what's going to happen. So it's better to have a plan in place ahead of time than to, not have one and something happens.
All right. I would add for the two project safeties that we've really noticed and had to do, being in Flint and a lot of abandoned places that we work on, we always have an officer come and do a sweep before we enter anywhere. So even if we have permission to be on the property, if it's been vacant, which a lot of them are, there could be homeless living there. And so just for the safety of your volunteers, you want to make sure that that's been swept through. And then we also do a safety check on whether they can even enter a building because maybe that the boards are bad or those kind of things. And then in planning with your partners, and we talked about including them early, this is something you want to consider. So you might have your release form and your waivers all set. Does that cover them also, right? So sometimes you might need to just add to your regular general one that you use for yourselves, where you would add on the bottom, this extends to Habitat for Humanity, blah, 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 or whoever I'm working with, so that they have something on file too if they need it. Because a lot of times we might say, yep, you're all set, we have it approved. But if I'm now giving it to the commission, say the pictures, the commission is a little different. They're okay because they'll come to me for the approval. If they get talked to about, I had a picture of this kid that I put on social media, they're going to come to me for that release. But someone you're working with locally could be that they need it to actually have their name on it also. It's not okay for them to just see the United Way one and that it was approved and gone through United Way. So sometimes you might need to leave a blanket area on the bottom of those that you can include all partners at the event so that it covers them. And then we always, if there's riders on your insurance, so we always, when we're offsite, we have found at ours that we need to call our insurance company and they just send us a rider that's available for that day. Because we're not actually working at our site, we're at the Dorton Event Center for MLK Day. And so they're like, well, you have to cover insurance. Well, our insurance will cover it, but I didn't find out the first year, you're right, until the last minute that I actually needed my insurance to add a rider for the day, right? So you might be covered and think you're covered because it's in there, but you'd be surprised to know that in some instances, your insurance company needs to just send you a rider. It doesn't cost any more money or anything. You just have to have that on file. All right, next slide. Communication strategy. So
Hi, everyone. I think we're going to pause at this point. We've gone a bit over, and I will send out the recording. We are stopping at 1:13:22. So I will send that out, and I'll note that so that we can all find that when we go to pick up where we're at. So thank you, everyone, for being here today, and thanks for staying along. We'll see you at our next training, and I will send the details out. Thank you.